share some of our thinking about our project. The DIPIP project, DIPIP stands for Data Informed Practice Improvement Project, and it is what it says. We work with classroom level data to help teachers think about their teaching and their mathematical knowledge in order to improve their practice. And we do this through the means of professional learning communities. So I'm going to focus today on what I think are some of the key aspects of professional learning communities in mathematics, for mathematics teachers, in mathematics departments if you want, in schools. But first I'd like to, first I need to apologize. I did say to Barbara when she asked me to talk that I've got another meeting on campus at 2 o'clock, so I am going to have to leave a little bit after 1, and I'm sorry to leave you in the middle. I would like to stay. Okay, but for my talk, I'd like to situate what we're doing in some of the current debates about what teachers need to know. Okay, John, okay. So, current debates that are happening around universities, NGOs, government, schools. What do teachers need to know? And I think there's a general consensus that teachers need content knowledge and pedagogical content knowledge, and they also need to develop new practices. But where people sit in relation to those three is substantially different depending on who you talk to. I think there seems to be a movement around which says teachers need content knowledge, and that's all we hear, teachers need content knowledge. And people go into classrooms and they look at what teachers are doing, and every single thing that they find slightly problematic about what teachers are doing in classrooms, they say, oh, they don't have the content knowledge. Okay, I think that's far too easy an explanation, and if we take that as an explanation, we're actually not going to make much progress. Of course, teachers need content knowledge, and of course, everyone can always develop their content knowledge, but it has to come along with other things. And for us, that's pedagogical content knowledge and practices, and in fact, what we're seeing in our project is that a focus on practice and pedagogical content knowledge in a particular way can lead teachers to develop their content knowledge. It's also important to remember what we mean when we talk about content knowledge, and I'll give you an example a little bit later, but for the most part, high school mathematics teachers actually do have content knowledge. They know the procedures and they can teach them. Okay? The issue is, how are they teaching them? Okay? Are they teaching them with connection to the mathematical concepts, with connection to the mathematical meanings? I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but I need to state this because it's quite important to understand what we're doing. So when we work with content knowledge, we're working to go deeper. We're talking about conceptual knowledge that sometimes teachers have, but doesn't always make its way into the classroom because it's actually not part of their pedagogical content knowledge or their practices that they should be teaching in that way, even though they may have the conceptual knowledge themselves. Okay. So we're trying to work with the three of those and see how they interact in more subtle ways than is currently kind of the great cause for content knowledge. The next question is, how do teachers best learn the above? Okay, so some around the place here, I won't say where, around the place we have content knowledge workshops. One size fits all. Just put all teachers into workshops, decide how many they need, so many per teacher per year, that's all we can afford per teacher, we have to get to every single teacher, and they need to learn trigonometry or statistics, okay? My worry about that is are those workshops teaching teachers what they know already? Or are they going deeper? And how are they working with the translation of that knowledge into the classroom? Okay. Are they working with pedagogical content knowledge? How does one work with pedagogical content knowledge in workshops? And how does one work with practice in workshops? So we have these one-size-fits-all workshops, and they tend to be somewhat fragmented. Okay, and that the international literature has shown as well. A lot of teacher development is fragmented. The other option, coming from where I come from, are long degree programs. Enroll people for ACEs, for B.Ed honours, for masters, and there you get a coherent build-up of sound ideas, but sometimes those don't even touch content knowledge. Some programs are working with content knowledge quite well, some are working with pedagogical content quite well, but what those, and I teach on those programs, and I'm always looking for new recruits to those programs, but what those programs need to do is they need to work with the academic literacy and build academic and research competence as well as professional competence. And we struggle with this all the time in our honours programs and our master's programs. How do we do justice to both of those? And it's not always easy to do justice to both of those. And certainly at master's level, the academic tends to win out for those of us who work in universities. A third possibility that we're seeing currently in the GPLMS is in-class mentoring. Okay, so you bring more experienced teachers, retired teachers into classrooms to help teachers think about what they can do better. One of the concerns about that is where do all these mentors come from? Who are they? Yes, some of them are retired teachers, but in many cases, what are we doing? We're pulling the best teachers out of the schools to go and be the mentors in other schools. And they're the best teachers, but do they have the know-how and the qualifications to really mentor other teachers? Do they have a broad range? Can they see across a whole range of classrooms, or are they just bringing what they used to do into the new classroom situation that they're in? So all of these different ways of working have strengths and weaknesses. Okay, some of them have more strengths than others. I think you've heard I might prefer the in-class mentoring or the degree programs to fragmented workshops. But they all have strengths and weaknesses, as do professional learning communities. But I'm proposing professional learning communities as a kind of organic, ground-up, as well as top-down, working in the schools. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Okay, the current policy framework, the integrated strategic planning framework for teacher development, has called for widespread establishment of professional learning communities in schools by 2020. In fact, it says they want a professional learning community in every school. I don't know if it's one or many, or it's not, the framework isn't that clear, but there certainly is a push towards professional learning communities. From our side, that's very positive, although we do worry about implementation because it's very unclear about what those can look like. Like, is a professional learning community just two teachers sitting and complaining about the principal or about the learners not learning? Does that count as a professional learning community? If so, we've got many of them. Okay? That's not what we mean. So there's little guidance as to what we should look like. Okay, so a key question that I'm going to address somewhat here is what does it take to develop and sustain PLCs in South Africa? And it takes quite a lot, okay? And there are three issues that are important there. The first is sustainability, okay? It's one thing to go and have a professional learning community that works for a year. How does that community sustain itself, often beyond the life of the project that has developed the professional learning community? The second is scalability. How do we get widespread professional learning communities without losing quality? It's very easy to have a few quality professional learning communities, as we think we have, but how does that get scaled? And then how does sustainability and scalability go together with deep learning? Okay, really the big question of our times for any NGO, any project work. But I'm relating it specifically to professional learning communities. Okay, so what are professional learning communities? If you read the literature, you will find many, many definitions, and they all sound great. Teachers working together, inquiring, collaborating, interrogating their practice, they all sound absolutely wonderful. And if they do work, they are wonderful. I mean, there is a reason why they sound wonderful. But we found it necessary to be quite specific about what it is we need. Okay. So the first thing is there's collaborative learning, and it's really, really important for the learning to be collaborative. Okay. I think we all know the scenario where one or two teachers from a school goes off to an in-service, comes back, fired up, excited, either meets resistance and resentment that they've been and the others haven't, or there just isn't support, and so it diffuses. Okay? So collaborative learning is really important, actually, for the last one, for sustainability, for the learning to continue to work in the school. Also for coherence, I'm going backwards here, through my points. Also for coherence, okay? One teacher doing one thing in a school, the effects dissipate. The whole maths department doing similar things builds, okay? Learners are then experiencing very similar shifts through all the maths teachers. And then what we say very strongly is that we don't advocate particular practices. We don't go in saying do group work, okay? it's a little bit not true. We do advocate one particular practice, which is engage with learners' errors, okay? But how teachers do that, they decide together, okay? What we do create an environment for in the professional learning communities is to interrogate practice. That is what is important. Look at what is working, look at what isn't working, and try to generate ways in which you can, the community generates ways in which you can shift its own practices. Absolutely key is the notion of professional learning. And we always say professional learning communities are a special example of communities of practice. They're not just any community of practice, because the focus is on the professional. And how do professionals learn? Two key things, data and knowledge. Professions have a knowledge base, and professions collect data on what's happening with their clients, in a sense. Okay, so we work with knowledge, we work with research, we work with ideas about best practice and learning that are out there, and teachers actually read papers and love them in our project. We set it up. And then we work with data and evidence. And the data and evidence, I think it's on my next slide. It's data and evidence from their classrooms. Okay, so this is my next slide. So what we're trying to do is develop a means of systematic inquiry into practice. And in our case, it's into learner errors. Learner needs, learner errors. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And we get the data on what are patterns of learner errors across a classroom or a school, from learners' test results, from learner interviews. We work with the teachers so they learn to interview learners so that they can access the learners' thinking behind the errors. Very, very important. From learners' work in their books, in tests, we work with teachers to access why the learner made the error, not only that the learner made the error. And then from classroom observations, we videotape teachers, and they come and present their videotapes, they're teaching to each other, and we have an atmosphere of systematic inquiry, interrogation of practice, and suggestions as to how to improve. Okay, I'm going to leave this one for now because I'm a bit worried about time. Just the structure of the project, we work within schools. We've currently got 7 schools, I think it's 8 actually, and 6 communities. They meet once a week during term time. It's a very, very demanding process. You can't have a professional learning community once a term. Meet regularly. Because it's so demanding, we've had some dropouts from the project, varying success rates, and we're currently looking. It's very interesting. We've interviewed a whole lot of teachers from those schools that left and those who are still in, and it's very interesting to see why some schools stay and why some schools leave. That's another presentation. We network across schools nearer to each other, so we work in 2 districts, and each district, the professional learning communities that work regularly in the schools come together once every 2 or so months to present to each other. That gives another source of feedback. Currently 25 teachers in the project, and when you look at how many learners they teach, that's the potential impact. Okay, I'm not going to go through the activities, it's going to take too long. This is what I really want to focus on, because there are a number of things that are key to successful learning communities. Absolutely crucial are the facilitators. Currently we work with university-based facilitators. They are experienced math teachers, experienced math teacher educators, they're graduate students, they know the resource, the research, they have strong conceptual resources, and they work with the teachers in particular ways to help the teachers to understand what's happening with their learner errors and how they can develop what they learn from their learner errors into new ways of teaching. Facilitators, absolutely crucially, are seen as critical friends. They're not there to evaluate teachers' work, and they are not imposers of particular practices. And we cannot say that more clearly. We do not tell teachers what to do. What we do is we assist teachers in analyzing their learners' errors and the reasons for those learners' errors. And then we ask questions like, so now that you know why these learners have made these errors, and having read the research that they're very similar to errors in England and America and wherever else, now what can we do about it? And that gets generated in the community. Different solutions for different schools depending on the context. Now the key thing. So we've worked well and we've got good results with our facilitators working with the professional learning communities. Part of our project is trying to understand the handover. So what happens, I mean, university-based facilitators are very few and far between and very expensive. So how do we hand over to school-based facilitators or district-based facilitators, which we have tried and haven't had so much luck with in the 2 districts in which we work, but if there are districts around here who are interested, we'd be willing to work with people. So how do we hand over this facilitation role? Okay? And then the idea is that we work, in fact what we have been doing in the schools that we're working with is that we work with one of the teacher leaders. They go through the project, they learn the project, and then they take over with some support from us, and that support is gradually withdrawn. That is the phase we're in at the moment. I cannot tell you how it works or how it doesn't work, because we're busy doing that at the moment. Okay. Thanks, Kat. All right, so what is the role of the facilitator in these conversations? There's 3 roles, and I should say that we started off the project with not much of a clearly articulated view of what facilitators do. Okay, we knew that they had to create a positive atmosphere, they had to allow for challenge and critique, they had to get teachers to articulate, but we didn't really know how they could do that. So as we've been going through the project, we've been trying to articulate, well, what is it that we do well as facilitators, and what is it that we need to learn to do better? And in fact, we're hoping to develop a short course for facilitators for professional learning communities, if we get the funding that we're hoping to get. And that would be able to work with facilitators more broadly to develop, if there are professional learning communities in schools who want their facilitators to come on a course, we could do that, we can identify facilitators. So that's our hope for the future. So how we've managed to articulate the facilitation role is that there are 3 key roles: content, process and inquiry, and building community. And I'm going to start with an example just to exemplify some of those, what we need. We actually do have them quite well articulated. Okay, so this is an example that was brought to a network learning community meeting by one of the teachers in one of our schools. They had planned a lesson as an introduction to algebra, and this is the task that she gave the learners. Share 47 Rand between 2 learners, so that one is 5 Rand more than the other. And what we encourage the teachers to do, they plan lessons together, they teach them, and then we encourage them to analyze their lessons, looking for episodes where they dealt well with the learner error, or where they dealt not so well with the learner error. And they bring those for discussion, and then we talk about it. So this is what happened in this teacher's classroom. One learner wrote, 47 divided by 2 is 23.5. I add 5, I get 28.5. I subtract 5, I get 18.5. That's what the 2 learners had. Okay? The teacher identified that as a learner error. Okay? And she thought she dealt very well with this learner error. That's how she presented it to us. She said to the class, can someone do it in a different way? So a usual move for maths, or for some maths teachers. So another learner came up, did the algebraic problem as you see it. I'm assuming you can all do that level of maths, and there's the solution. Okay. The solution, yes. Okay, so what does the facilitator do in the community with this? Okay. What is important to recognize content-wise, process-wise, and building community-wise? Okay, so if we go to the content, okay, the important thing is to interrogate current knowledge and bring in new knowledge of content. Okay, and this links to learner thinking. We use the learner thinking to get to the content knowledge. Okay, and we use the question that we asked in that case. We have a number of questions. What is the learner thinking? How might this make sense to the learner? Why would the learner do this in light of the current knowledge? In this case, the facilitator asked, what is valid and what is not valid in the learner thinking? In that first example, when they divided, okay? And the thing there, so there was some discussion, okay? Is there some validity in that learner response? And some of the teachers were saying, no, there's no validity, it's incorrect. Look, there's the correct answer. And some of the teachers were saying, of course there's validity. It's a perfectly appropriate way to solve that problem is to divide by 2 and then add something onto either side. What the learner didn't see was what to add. The learner added 5 instead of 2.5. Okay, if the learner had added 2.5 to either side, no problem, problem solved. Some of the teachers were saying, well, that's all very well, but that's not going to help the learner in other problems. The learner needs to know the algebra. So this was all discussion around the content of this example and what was happening. So first we asked what is valid and what is not valid in the learner thinking. Then we identify the significant idea. So the significant idea there is that the first method did have validity in it. And it's important for teachers to note that validity and affirm it with their learners. To say, you know what, you were on the right track, you only made one mistake. Can the class think about what that mistake would be? Another learner might have been able to show that, or the teacher might have been able to explain it. And then talk about, well, why is the algebra better? On other instances, is the algebra better? Or why is the algebra better? Okay? So making the mathematical focus explicit. Now this kind of discussion happened with the teachers, needed to be facilitated by the facilitator, focusing on the mathematics. Process and inquiry. Here we're working with constructive challenge, relevant, helpful conversation. Okay? What's important here is to ask teachers to elaborate their thinking. So before the facilitator comes in and says, well, what's valid and what's not valid, the facilitator would say, well, why is that an error? Why do you think that's an error? Okay? Gets it to articulate. And we try to get as many teachers to articulate and to respond as possible. Then to probe the ideas more deeply and to challenge them. Facilitators should not be afraid of challenging ideas. We develop an atmosphere where it's okay for anyone to challenge anyone's ideas. We try to draw everyone into the conversation. We take all ideas seriously. So I, as a facilitator, believe very strongly that that left-hand example is actually a much better way of showing learner thinking. For me, the learner who can do that left-hand example is actually thinking and reasoning. For most of the teachers, that's not the case. They think the algebra is better, okay? I mean, the left hand is also algebra, actually. But so I've got to work as a facilitator to say, I'm hearing you. The algebra is better. Why? When? In what circumstances? Let's work this out together. When do we want learners to be doing this evidence of thinking? When do we want them to be doing algebra? And when do we want them to be bringing it together? In that way, we build ideas among the teachers, and I'm not assuming as a facilitator that I'm always right for their context in particular, but in general as well. Keep the conversation on track. That's, anyone who's ever facilitated a conversation among engaged, interested teachers or anyone will know that that's difficult because you get lots of ideas coming and you have to think about, well, how do they all fit in the bigger picture, and you occasionally bring everyone back to the main point and you summarize and all of that. Okay, pull ideas together, summarize and take them. And then building community. And this is related to process and inquiry, but it's slightly different because here is where we really want the teachers to feel that they are part of a community, that they have a trust and confidence in each other, that they can actually admit their own weaknesses in order to learn. You cannot learn if you can't admit your weakness. And you also cannot learn if you don't have strength, so that both of those have to come in. So we validate and challenge ideas, just like we might want the teachers in that example to say, wow, you're on the right track, you've made a very good move, you've divided by 2, but there's something slightly problematic. We do exactly the same for the teachers. Wow, that's an excellent idea, but I'm not quite following this. Does someone else want to comment on it, or can you articulate it further? So we validate and challenge ideas. Take ideas seriously, always. So after 3 sessions on deep error analysis and how we get into the learner's thinking, one teacher says, oh, we haven't got time to do this, our classes are too big, why are we even doing this? This is a waste of time. Okay, sounds familiar? That's a serious idea. That is an important thing to take seriously. We do not skip over it. We say, okay, how do we do this in big classes with little time? And should we be doing it? Is it important? And then invariably discussion will happen where teachers will work out a way that it works for them. We link ideas to each other. That builds community. So-and-so, you said this. I'm hearing some agreement there. Are you two in agreement? Are you two in a disagreement? It seems like the community is saying this. Build that up. We show expertise, we show our own weaknesses and uncertainty. And let me tell you, sometimes you get into a discussion of the depth of a mathematical idea, that even me with an honours in pure mathematics really struggles to understand. Okay? The teachers can get to really deep mathematical ideas. And then I looked and said, wow, I'd never thought of that before. That's really interesting. Is it like this or is it like this? They can see our own uncertainty and weaknesses. We have to be able to show that. And at the same time, we have to be able to show our own expertise because we are bringing something to the conversation. Without us, it wouldn't be as good as if we were there. So we have to balance that, expertise and weakness and uncertainty. We show support in all manner of the teacher's work. They bring other questions to us, we chat about other questions, we complain about the ANAs with them, and then we decide we're going to analyse the ANAs next year. So all manner of support. And it's not blind support. It's like, okay, well, we're all complaining about the ANAs and there are problems with them, but let's try to understand what they're trying to achieve. And let's see if we can use them for our purposes. And then finally, we laugh a lot. Okay, laughter in a professional learning community is absolutely crucial. It shows that people can identify with each other, that they can challenge each other, that they've got a history together, that they work together well, that they can tease each other. And it makes for discussing really difficult issues. What errors are your learners making? Why are they making that? How is it related to your own teaching? How is it related to your mathematical knowledge? How can all of those grow? It oils the wheels to talk about that. So in a very brief, 10 minutes, I've told you how to be facilitators. Let's all go. No, seriously, what I've tried to do is show you just how difficult the process is. And many of you have facilitated. I know on some level I'm speaking to the converted. But I think what's important, if we are to develop sustainable, scalable, deep professional learning communities in South Africa, we need to work with this. We need to work on how to train facilitators who are not necessarily PhD students with a long history in mathematics, but who do have some way that they can work in their local community in relation to people with expertise elsewhere, NGOs, universities. I think that's our challenge. That's what we need to do if professional learning communities are going to be a success in our country. Thank you.